One wrong turn here could be your last. Roads carved into cliffs so narrow, two cars can never pass. Paths hanging above bottomless canyons, just feet from the void. Some routes climb through clouds where ice and fog turn every mile into a gamble. Others cut through jungles and deserts where nature fights to reclaim the path. These are not roads for the faint of heart, not built for comfort or convenience. They are humanity's most dangerous gateways, where courage is all that stands between survival and the edge. Join us as we travel the world's most perilous roads, where every mile tells a story of risk and resilience. Lysebotn Road, Norway. The Lysebotn Road is a knotted ribbon of 27 sharp curves leading travellers from high clouds down to the sea inlet. Every year, the most resilient athletes gather here to conquer a grueling uphill cycling race across these rocky layers. It is astonishing that even in the middle of summer, massive white snow walls as high as 5 metres still stand firm along the narrow path. The driving experience feels surreal as you wander into the mountain through a 340-degree spiral tunnel with no natural light. Pressure on the vehicle braking system is immense when facing a continuous 10% slope that can cause parts to glow with heat. Ultimately, this road serves as a beautiful testament to the harmony between human courage and the raw beauty of Nordic nature. Col de Liseran. Boring, France. Rising through snow and grey stone at nearly 9,100 feet. This pass feels like a black blade suspended over the Alps, and it is also the highest paved pass in the entire range. Most frightening of all, much of the narrow upper road runs with little or no guard rails, so one wrong move of the wheel can send a vehicle toward the shattered rock below. In early summer, the road often opens between snow walls rising to nearly 33 feet, turning the whole climb into a frozen corridor that feels both beautiful and unreal. Since 1938, it has belonged to Tour de France legend, becoming the kind of climb where the greatest riders have to empty their lungs and legs just to defeat the altitude. From the bends hanging over the edge, drivers can look straight toward permanent glaciers glittering in the sun, making the whole journey feel like a slow climb along the rim of an ice world. Transalpina Itama, Romania. Stretching across the spine of the mighty Carpathians, Transalpina lifts vehicles away from the familiar ground and pushes them onto the back of the mountains, where driving feels more like moving through the sky than holding to a road. Because it is so exposed and so high, the route becomes a dangerous territory of speed, with long sweeping bends and unguarded edges waiting for one corner taken too hard. In some sections, the road rises above the low cloud layer and makes the car feel as if it is floating over a wide ocean that hides the world below. At its highest point of about 7,037 feet, it is the highest paved road in Romania, a corridor where altitude alone is enough to completely change the way the drive feels. Because it follows the mountain ridgelines themselves, people inside the vehicle can look straight down into deep valleys on both sides, with views so open that almost nothing blocks the horizon. Few people realise that the first foundations of this route may go back nearly 2,000 years, when Roman legions opened a strategic military path through the mountains and left behind the trace of a road that still feels fierce today. Ticlio Pass, Peru. Ticlio Pass is a breathtaking challenge in the Andes where the paved road winds through the towering peaks of Peru. Here your heart must work at full capacity to fight against the extremely low oxygen levels, which are only half of what you find at sea level. A surreal landscape unfolds with sparkling frozen lakes and grey cliffs that are frequently buried under a thick and mysterious fog. Due to the low pressure at an altitude of over 4,800 metres, water boils at a strange temperature of only 84 degrees Celsius, making normal cooking impossible. Drivers often have to constantly chew coca leaves to stimulate blood flow and help their bodies endure the splitting headaches caused by altitude sickness. Crossing this summit is more than just a trip, as it stands as a symbol of human willpower against the overwhelming vastness of nature. Harshest Pass, Slovenia. Between the sheer limestone walls of the Julian Alps, this pass looks like a cold cut across the mountain, where overwhelming beauty always comes with a very real sense of danger. Few people realise the route was rushed into existence in 1915 to serve the Isonzo Front, turning a breathtaking mountain pass into a link in the machinery of war. On the opposite rock face, erosion shaped the image of a giant woman looking down into the gorge, giving the place a legend that feels both mysterious and haunting. As the highest pass in the Julian Alps, it is surrounded by sharp, grey-white limestone peaks that clash hard with the dark green pine forest below. Its clearest signature is still the 50 hairpin turns marked with green signs, and 24 on the northern side still keep their old cobbled surface, so every curve feels like driving across the past. But behind that beauty lies a very dark history. About 10,000 Russian prisoners were forced to build the road, and then an avalanche in 1916 buried more than 300 people, leaving a small wooden Orthodox chapel beside the pass as a quiet memorial. Cuesta de Lipan, Argentina. Like a thread of concrete thrown across the burning slopes of the Andes, this pass coils through the air with a beauty so overwhelming that every turn feels like a test of nerve. Its most impressive feature is the chain of non-stop hairpin bends, a feat of engineering that lets vehicles swallow a huge change in elevation over a very short distance. The higher it climbs, the more the mountains shift in colour under the hard sun, from deep red and burnt orange to pale yellow and faint violet, with a sheer wall on one side and an abyss on the other changing tone through the day. This is also the main road linking the low valleys with the white salt plateau above, turning the pass into a forced gateway into the world of altitude. From about 6,560 feet, the road surges to nearly 13,681 feet in a short stretch, enough for both people and engines to feel the grip of thinning oxygen. At the top, the view opens onto the wide expanse of the Salt Plateau and the layered mountains beyond. making the whole drive feel like a climb onto the roof of a dry and burning planet. Schollenen Gorge, Switzerland. Hidden between sheer granite walls like a death gate in the Alps, this gorge once strangled the flow of trade across Europe for centuries. The modern route no longer crawls along the floor, but clings to the mountainside through a chain of half-open galleries drilled into the rock to escape rockfall and keep traffic alive in brutal terrain. The strangest part is that in one single view, traces of the old path, a dark stone arch bridge, and newer transport structures are stacked over each other like different ages pressed into the same slit in the mountain. Inside it all, the gorge cuts through an extremely hard granite mass in the Alps, where the mountain itself feels like a barrier that never wanted to let people pass. The near-vertical rock walls squeeze the space into a suffocating V-shaped trap, while the glacial river below keeps roaring against the stone and throwing the sound back up through the chasm. Cut into that vertical rock face is a giant memorial cross, reminding visitors that this place is not only an engineering triumph, but also a landscape tied to battle and many lost lives. Tizian Morocco. Tizi-en-Tishka serves as a grand bridge across the Atlas Mountains, opening a legendary path from the city into the heart of the Sahara Desert. The constant pressure of the descent makes the smell of overheated brakes a defining part of the journey through these crimson cliffs. Along the roadside, locals display shimmering quartz crystals and geodes harvested directly from deep caverns within the mountains. At an altitude of over 2,200 meters, you will feel a sharp shift as the air thins and the temperature drops unexpectedly. The sharp hairpin turns wind so tightly that they form a magnificent maze, clinging to the vibrant iron oxide mountainside. Reaching the summit is not just crossing a geographical border, but a moment where one finds absolute freedom amidst the vast wilderness. Haleakala Highway, USA. Few paved roads on Earth climb as brutally as Haleakala Highway, shooting up from the humid edge of the sea onto the back of a sleeping volcano and creating one of the sharpest elevation gains on the planet. As the road rises, vehicles punch through a thick cloud layer and emerge into still air above, where sunrise and sunset seem to hang over a sea of clouds like something no longer tied to the ground. Across the grey volcanic ash, silver swords appear like bright metallic thorn balls, and some of them may wait about 50 years to bloom a single time before dying. Even more astonishing is that in less than about 37 miles, the route crosses 6 of the Earth's 14 climate zones, from humid tropical weather to dry alpine barrens high above. At the end, the route opens onto a volcanic depression about 7 miles long, 2 miles wide, and nearly 2,600 feet deep. So vast it looks like a piece of the moon has been torn open on the summit. BR-239, Trans-Amazonian Highway, Brazil. BR-230 tore across the green lung of the Earth like a giant scar, where humanity's dream of forcing the jungle to submit ended up exposing its weakness before nature. Building the highway stripped the soil of its stability and caused erosion of about 45 tonnes per acre each year, warping the road, while countless illegal branches pushed deeper into the forest for logging and gold mining. Stretching for more than 2,650 miles, it became Brazil's third longest road, cutting through 7 states like a blade linking the Atlantic coast to the inner core of the Amazon. The project began in 1972 under the slogan, "Land without people, for people without land," driven by the ambition to move settlers in and turn the forest into an easy source of wealth. But about 80% of the highway is still unpaved, so the rainy season turns it into a sea of mud that can trap trucks for weeks, while the dry season smothers everything in thick red dust. Crossing the homelands of more than 10 ancient tribes, BR-230 did not just tear into the forest, but also helped ignite bloody conflicts that lasted for decades. Stalheimskliva, Norway. Clinging to the cliff like a hard ribbon of stone and asphalt, this old road was opened between 1842 and 1846 and was carved almost entirely by hand with hammers and crude explosives through dangerous mountain rock. Its most haunting stretches are the parts caught between two huge waterfalls crashing down at the same time, where mist and thunder fill the air as if the whole road were trapped inside a cold, wet snare. Along the edge, the protective walls were stacked from natural stone without mortar, yet they have endured snow and ice for nearly 200 years like a quiet test of time. In less than 1 mile, the road climbs about 820 feet, reaches an 18% grade, and twists through 13 sharp hairpin turns, so looking down from above feels almost like staring into a fall. The entire route hangs on the wall of an almost perfect U-shaped valley, where rough grey granite crashes against the deep green below and creates a beauty that feels both majestic and threatening. Since 2021, motor vehicles have been completely banned because the danger of rockfall can no longer be controlled. So the only way to truly feel the road's brutality now is to walk or climb it by bicycle. Rodovia da Morte, BR 381, Brazil. This Brazilian highway appears as a brutal death row where national prosperity is traded for blood and horrific collisions occurring every single day. Narrow turning, red-eye force massive containers to invade the entire opposing lane, making every yard beside the abyss a life or death confrontation. The altitude jumps from sea level to over 3,600 feet, subjecting both vehicles and drivers to the torture of shifting pressure. The name Highway of Death stands as a haunting confirmation of casualty rates that have led the nation for decades. A dense blanket of fog frequently surrounds the route, swallowing visibility to less than 16 feet and isolating drivers in a solid white void. The mixture of leaked oil and rainwater on the asphalt creates a lethal slickness ready to punish anyone who underestimates this cruelty. Ruta Sandini, Costa Rica. Ruta 32 is a vital road about 98 miles long, cutting through one of Costa Rica's largest protected forests to link the capital with the Caribbean coast. Around many bends, reinforced concrete retaining walls stand packed along the edge to hold weak ground in place, as if the whole road has to brace itself against rainwater, mud, and the weight of the mountain. It also passes through the country's only mountain tunnel, about 1,844 feet long, drilled through hard rock in 1987 as a major engineering mark in this cold, wet range. Above the pavement, ancient trees rising to about 164 feet lock their crowns together so tightly that much of the daylight is swallowed, turning long stretches into a dark cut through the forest. Once the road enters the cloud forest, humidity stays near 100%, and low clouds can spill across the asphalt and push visibility below 16 feet. Because of year-round heavy rain and steep volcanic slopes, Ruta 32 is seen as Costa Rica's most dangerous geological corridor, where landslides happen so often that periodic closures feel almost normal. Puente de Oyuela, Mexico. Hanging like a steel spiderweb over the mouth of a desert abyss, this bridge stretches more than 1,043 feet across the canyon, so thin from a distance that it seems as if the wind could snap it at any moment. On the far side lie the ruins of a mining town that once held more than 5,000 workers, with electricity and luxuries that appeared before they did in many larger cities, before a catastrophic underground flood in the early 20th century left it abandoned. The narrow shape of the canyon below pulls desert wind into violent gusts, turning the whole bridge into a shaking pendulum whenever a hard blast cuts through. Completed in 1892, it once ranked among the longest suspension bridges in the world, with huge steel cables anchored deep into limestone and towers later replaced with reinforced steel so the bridge could survive for more than a century. The deck is only about 6 feet wide and built from widely spaced wooden planks, so every step opens a view of a drop more than 361 feet below through the dry creaking under your feet. Around it spread cracked orange-grey cliffs, thorny scrub, abandoned mine shafts and empty window frames, creating a scene that feels part Western film and part remnant of a world that has already died. Mount Washington Auto Road, USA. Opened in 1861, Mount Washington Auto Road is the oldest man-made tourist attraction in the United States, a short road brutal enough to make the climb itself more unforgettable than the summit. The most frightening part is how fast the weather can turn on a mountainside with almost no guardrails. Visibility can collapse from far-reaching views to only a few dozen feet in almost no time. Strangest of all are the Crumholz trees, crushed by wind into twisted mats that cling to the ground like giant bonsai tortured by the mountain for centuries. At the summit, the road reaches a wind speed of 231 miles per hour, recorded in 1934, once set a world record, and it still remains the highest ever measured at a staffed weather station. Todra Gorge, Morocco. Set on the eastern side of the High Atlas, Todra Gorge looks like a giant cut split into the mountain, one of the world's most spectacular limestone canyons, with walls rising to about 1,312 feet, while the floor below stays strangely flat. Flowing along the base is the Todra River, the patient force that wore through the rock for millions of years and shaped this place into something both violent and strangely precise. Because the gorge is so deep and so narrow, sunlight reaches the bottom for only a few short hours each day, turning the walls from pale pink to burning orange before they sink back into cold shadow. In some sections, the passage squeezes down to only about 33 feet wide, making people feel almost swallowed between two colossal walls of stone. Canyon. The rock faces are so smooth and sheer that they seem machine polished, and that is part of why Todra has become one of the world's top limestone climbing destinations, with hundreds of established routes. Mount Blue Sky Scenic Byway, USA. Gliding along the highest paved road on the continent. This route lifts the vehicle to about 14,130 feet, making every bend feel like a one more push away from the earth and closer to the edge of the sky. Strangest of all, mountain goats and bighorn sheep are unusually fearless here, often standing beside the pavement or walking calmly through the road as if the altitude belongs to them. On both sides rise massive granite walls, thousands of feet high, carved by ancient glaciers into faces that feel almost perfectly sheer, giving the whole drive a cold and monumental look. In only about 15 miles, the journey carries you through a sharp biological shift as the lower world falls away and the thinner air begins to take over every sensation. Once the road climbs fully above the vegetation line, the landscape becomes little more than grey stone and tiny alpine flowers that burst into colour for only a few short weeks each year. At the highest stop, on a clear day, the far horizon seems to curve slightly and the whole mountain range opens below, making it feel as if you are standing on the deck of a ship suspended in the sky. Öksai Pass, or Route 939, in Iceland. Saving time here comes at a brutally real price because Öxi is a notorious gravel pass cutting through a wall of sea-facing mountains in eastern Iceland, where every drive feels like a wager against survival. On both sides, there are no trees at all, only cracked black volcanic rock and faded Arctic moss, giving the landscape the feel of a place drained of warmth and life. The most unnerving sight is the chain of waterfalls dropping straight from the mountain right beside the tyres, turning the whole pass into a giant drainage machine roaring beside the driver. Driver, the road itself is mostly compacted earth and loose gravel, and many sections are only 1 lane wide, clinging to deep drop-offs with no guardrails to correct a mistake. From above, the valley looks like a huge V-shaped wound carved by ancient glaciers, and every stream crossing is reduced to a narrow steel bridge where drivers from opposite directions must yield to one another. Kelsteinstrasse, Germany. This is one of Europe's most extreme transport landmarks, a strip of road that climbs the Alps almost like a man-made wound cut into the mountain. But it does not carry vehicles all the way to the summit. The drive ends suddenly inside the mountain, and from there, a solid brass-clad elevator shoots another 407 feet upward to the structure above. Along the cliff edge, the retaining walls were hand-built from huge stone blocks so they would blend with the mountains, and the whole route uses only one hairpin turn before passing through 5 rock tunnels with a total length of about 909 feet. Since 1952, private cars have been banned from this road because the slope is steep enough to burn brakes and throw drivers out of control within minutes on the way down. Today, only specially built buses are allowed to use it with magnetic braking systems and tuned engines designed to stop them from slipping back down this terrifying climb. Tateyama Yama Kuroba Alpine Route, Japan. Few places turn a mountain crossing into something this strange and memorable, where people built an entire travel system to open a path through the northern Japanese Alps. In the middle of that journey stands an arch dam about 610 feet high, once the tallest in the country. And in summer, its massive water releases throw up huge clouds of spray and bright rainbows. When snowfall piles up to about 66 feet, GPS-guided snowplows cut through the frozen mass to create a safe passage where visitors can walk directly beneath towering white walls of snow. Along a route of about 23 miles, travellers use 7 different kinds of transport, from cable cars to electric buses and ropeways, to reduce damage to the fragile, high mountain environment. At its most striking section, 2 pure white snow walls run beside a strip of black asphalt, making the road feel as if it has been sliced deep into a mountain of ice. Opened to the public in 1971, the route links the 2 sides of the mountain range through a unique transport network and became a major milestone in Japan's high altitude engineering. Kokuihara Highway, Canada. Nicknamed the Highway Through Hell, this is the main artery running from Canada's Pacific coast into the interior plateau, where the weather can turn so fast that an ordinary drive suddenly becomes a test of nerves. On the long downhill grades, deep gravel runaway lanes climbing back up the slope wait like a final trap to stop trucks that lose their brakes before they plunge into disaster. Along the route, electronic signs keep receiving wind and temperature data from weather stations, updating almost every minute to warn drivers before the weather can break their reaction time. Within about 62 miles, the scenery shifts from dense wet forest to bare rocky mountains and then into semi-arid land, making the highway feel like a cut through several climate worlds in one run. Because it sits between moist ocean air and cold continental air, dry pavement can turn into a wall of blinding snow within minutes, sending visibility and traction straight into dangerous territory. The 124-mile mountain section was completed in 20 months in 1986, an infrastructure record that proved people could force a road through the mountains, but never truly make nature obedient. Saddle Road, Hawaii, USA. Cutting across a cold, wild saddle between 2 of the largest volcanoes on Earth, Saddle Road links the eastern and western sides of the island through a world covered in black rock and highland wind. The strangest sight is that across endless dark basalt fields, the yellow and white road lines burn sharply against the ground, like a man made slash across the surface of another planet. Along the route lie both smooth rolling Pahoehoe lava and rough jagged aya, making the land feel ancient, violent, and still marked by eruptions from a distant past. After the modernisation from 2004 to 2017, the old rough military trail was turned into a smooth paved road, stable enough to serve as one of the island's main lifelines. That is also why this road became the main access route to world class observatories set above 13,000 feet, where humans place machines that look deep into space on the back of an ancient volcano. Kirba Village Road, India. Hanging at about 14,010 feet, this is the access route to one of the Himalayas' highest motorable settlements, where the road feels like a thin thread holding onto the mountainside. Along the roadside, box-shaped homes with walls about 12 to 20 inches thick are built from packed earth and broken stone, like shelters designed for one purpose only: to keep the cold outside. In the middle of that route stands a steel suspension bridge more than 328 feet long, stretched across a gorge hundreds of feet deep to link the cliff road with the isolated settlement beyond. After that, the track keeps curling along the edge with sharp hairpin turns, and some sections are so narrow that drivers are given almost no room for error. Its surface remains mostly beaten earth and rough gravel, a road constantly worn down by melting snow and the slow movement of high mountain ground. In winter, deep snow erases the road's real shape, transport nearly stops, and the area is cut off from the outside world for months at a time. Georgian Military Highway, Georgia, Russia. Stretching across the Caucasus, this vital road runs about 132 miles and serves as a direct land corridor linking the South Caucasus with the Russian Federation. Today, it is also the only major freight route in the region that avoids conflict zones, which is why it must carry more than 8,000 heavy trucks a day. To keep traffic alive under avalanche and rockfall danger, a chain of half open concrete galleries is pinned to the cliffs, letting snow and debris sweep over the roof above moving vehicles. From green lowlands with large reservoirs, the road climbs past 7,800 feet into bare high ground, dry grass, and peaks wrapped in almost permanent ice and snow. Snow, in some sections, it is squeezed into the floor of a fracture gorge so narrow it feels airless, then suddenly twists into repeated U shaped turns gripping the steep mountainside. When traffic piles up near the border, long lines of tractor trailers can stretch for about 12 to 19 miles, wrapping around the mountain like a giant ribbon of metal with no visible end to. Maze District Roads, USA. Called the loneliest dead land on Earth, this stone maze is a place where geology is so overwhelming that any sense of direction begins to break apart. In the late 19th century, its tangled canyon system became an ideal hiding place for some of the most notorious outlaw gangs of the American West, because once you slipped inside, you could almost vanish from the outside world. The cliffs here are also coated with dark glossy mineral stains, creating a violent contrast against the blazing red-orange sandstone under the desert sun. What passes for a road is really just a faint set of tyre tracks draped across rock and deep sand, fragile enough for wind and sandstorms to erase almost completely. True to the name, the maze, the land is shredded into countless canyons, stone towers, and sheer walls woven together so tightly that from above it looks like the folds of a brain made of sandstone. And if a vehicle breaks down out here, beauty turns instantly into a survival problem because recovery often costs more than $2,000 and specialised equipment may take many hours or even days to reach the site. Puente de Ojuela, Mexico. Hanging like a steel spiderweb over the mouth of a desert abyss, this bridge stretches more than 1,043 feet across the canyon, so thin from a distance that it seems as if the wind could snap it at any moment. On the far side lie the ruins of a mining town that once held more than 5,000 workers, with electricity and luxuries that appeared before they did in many larger cities, before a catastrophic underground flood in the early 20th century left it abandoned. The narrow shape of the canyon below pulls desert wind into violent gusts, turning the whole bridge into a shaking pendulum whenever a hard blast cuts through. Completed in 1892, it once ranked among the longest suspension bridges in the world, with huge steel cables anchored deep into limestone and towers later replaced with reinforced steel so the bridge could survive for more than a century. The deck is only about 6 feet wide and built from widely spaced wooden planks, so every step opens a view of a drop more than 361 feet below through the dry creaking under your feet. Around it spread cracked orange-grey cliffs, thorny scrub, abandoned mine shafts and empty window frames, creating a scene that feels part Western film and part remnant of a world that has already died. Agua Negra Pass, Chile, Argentina. Rising to about 15,682 feet, this pass is one of the highest motorable border crossings in the world, where altitude alone is enough to unsettle breathing and blur your sense of direction. Because the present route is so severe, it has also been chosen for the planned Andes Tunnel and the Andes Particle Physics Laboratory, expected to become one of South America's deepest underground research sites. But on the surface, most of the upper road is still a narrow and broken gravel track with almost no guardrails, so every mile feels like a test of nerve. Along the way, fractured mountain walls expose huge, ore-bearing layers, as if the Andes had been split open to reveal their own interior. And because the crossing is so high and so unforgiving, it usually opens only from December to April, while snow and ice seal it shut for most of the rest of the year. Siju River Bridge, China. Completed in 2009, this mega bridge held the title of the world's highest for years, with its deck hanging about 1,627 feet above the gorge floor, so high that the void below could swallow the Empire State Building whole. Against the deep green mountain forest, the bright orange suspension system and towers stand out violently, yet they are often swallowed by fog and cloud, making the bridge seem to drive straight into emptiness. From a distance, that enormous steel structure looks impossibly thin, more like a strand of thread stretched over a black hole in the earth than an expressway built for heavy traffic. Because the canyon was too deep and the wind too violent for boats or helicopters to pull the first line across, engineers had to fire the pilot cable over the gap with military rockets. The result was a main span of about 2,953 feet with no support tower in the middle, stretched across a giant geological wound cut open by the river. Looking down from the deck, the river at the bottom shrinks to little more than a faint thread, a reminder that this whole feat is hanging above an almost endless drop. Besang Pass, Philippines, cut into the mountainside at about 5,217 feet. This pass looks like a thin ribbon hanging between cloud and abyss, where the land itself turned the road into a natural fortress. In 1945, it was here that Filipino guerrillas and Allied forces broke the Japanese line under General Tomoyuki Yamashita, helping open the way to Japan's final collapse in the Philippines. The route twists into a maze of tight hairpin bends and blind corners, clinging so hard to the mountain edge that every turn still feels like a test of nerve. Instead of the familiar tropical heat of the Philippines, this place is ruled by cool air, tall pine forest, and fog thick enough to erase the whole ridgeline in the morning. One side is a rough wall of rock ready to break away, and the other is a deep drop swallowed by a sea of cloud. So crossing it, even now, still feels like passing through a battlefield that never fully fell silent. At the summit today, the stone memorial still stands quietly in the mountain mist like a final sentry, reminding visitors that this high place holds not only beauty, but also the memory of those who died here. Bialach na Ba, Scotland. The Bialach na Ba route winds through the Scottish Highlands as a breathtaking challenge among thousand-year-old sandstone cliffs. Upon reaching the summit, the lush green world retreats to make way for moss and greystone, creating a desolate scene like another planet. Once a trail for drovers to herd cattle across the mountains for sale, this road carries the ancient soul and history of the Gaelic people. With a terrifying gradient of up to 20%, every engine and braking system must struggle not to be defeated by the treacherous terrain. The majestic reddish-brown sandstone cliffs surrounding the path date back over 1 billion years, witnessing the persistent erosion of time and frost. Successfully conquering these hairpin turns is a powerful statement of the courage and masterful skill of any driver. F. Jalabaxlider Sidri, Iceland, and F210 is a journey tucked deep within the Icelandic highlands where wild beauty touches the boundaries of the most surreal dreams. The glacial rivers crossing the path always maintain a freezing temperature of 32 degrees Fahrenheit, ready to overwhelm any unprepared driver. Now, amidst the ash plains, perfect cone-shaped volcanoes covered in green moss appear like architectural structures from another planet. Conquering this route is an experience of pure solitude, where you become the only traveller in a primitive world that remain untamed. Moteng Pass, Lesotho, at an elevation above 2,800 metres, this mountain pass reveals a world where thinner air makes the human body clearly feel its own limits. The route becomes a true challenge for drivers with constant sharp turns that demand precise control at every moment. Clouds often drift at eye level, turning the road into a journey through the sky rather than a simple path on land. And strong winds can reach up to 80 kilometers per hour, adding pressure on vehicles and making conditions far less predictable. Space. The thin air also lowers the boiling point of water to around 90 to 93 degrees Celsius, a small detail that highlights how different this environment truly is. Cuesta del Obispo, Argentina. Forget ordinary highways because this Argentine pass is a red rock theatre where you drive straight into the heart of the heavens. Gravity pulls so hard on the way down that your brakes will smoke and smell like burnt rubber as they fight the slope. High up, near the peaks, fierce mountain winds can rock your vehicle from side to side like a toy in a storm. Often, you will float high above a solid ocean of mist, where the road behind you shrinks into a tiny silver needle. Captain Cook Highway, Australia. This coastal stretch is the only place on Earth where you are sandwiched between a prehistoric rainforest and the planet's largest coral reef. During the tropical storm season, severe rock slides frequently happen and can completely swallow this vital transportation link. You will travel through a deep wilderness that has existed for 140 million years, which is far older than the Amazon. The entire journey, spanning about 47 miles, hugs the water's edge of the Coral Sea, offering stunning views around every corner. This masterpiece was built during the Great Depression by workers who manually carved the path into the sheer mountain cliffs. Driving speed is strictly monitored along the route to protect the lives of both visitors and the rare wildlife. Tsikratscaro Pass, Georgia. Tsikratscaro Pass serves as a wild staircase touching the cloud layers of the Caucasus, where nature maintains its challenging and pristine beauty. The jagged, rocky terrain here will brutally punish any vehicle lacking a four-wheel drive system and specialised high ground clearance. Viewed from afar, the dirt path winding along the mountain crest looks like the spine of a prehistoric monster caught in a deep sleep. Hidden beneath the silence lies a strategic energy artery with an international oil pipeline buried deep under ancient mountain rocks. Despite the short distance, it takes 4 hours to navigate through steep inclines and dangerous rock traps. Mount Huashan Plank Walk, China. Would you dare step onto wooden planks only about 1 foot wide, hanging more than 6,600 feet high on a vertical cliff where one look down can tighten your chest at once? To get across, visitors must turn toward the rock, grip the iron chain, and move sideways one small step at a time while strong wind high above keeps making the feeling of danger even harder to ignore. The most stressful moment comes at the cable change points where each person must unclip and clip their two safety hooks again in open air, and even one slow move can shake the mind badly. Duh. This path, about 330 feet long, was made in the 13th century by a man seeking a deeply isolated place for spiritual practice. So, from the start, it carried the feeling of a route cut away from the ordinary world. The whole walk builds fear in stages, from about 66 feet of steep stone steps through about 98 feet of narrow rock space that forces the body close to the wall, and then into about 164 feet of planks hanging in the sky. On misty days, when clouds drift below your feet, the path starts to look like a strip of wood laid across the air, making it feel not only dangerous, but also like a thin line between the human world and somewhere beyond it. Caminito del Rey, Spain. There was a time when this place made the whole world shiver because it was a path fixed to a cliff more than 330 feet above the river, where broken concrete and rusty metal once hung over the deep void. On both sides rise vertical rock walls, and in some places they are only about 33 feet apart, creating a narrow wind corridor where sunlight reaches the blue water below only in thin bands. What makes it even more haunting is that the modern steel and wooden walkway now stands directly above the ruins of the old path, so the dangerous path still stays visible under every step. At first, it was only a route for workers building a hydroelectric system, but after King Alfonso XIII walked here in 1921 to open the dam, the name the King's Little Path was born. After falling into serious decay, the route had to close for 15 years, and when it reopened in 2015, it was fully rebuilt, much safer, but still strong enough to test people's nerves. The most breathless moment comes on the hanging bridge across the gorge, where the floor shakes lightly in strong wind and only 1,100 people each day are allowed to take on this challenge. Neast Point Cliff Path, Scotland. Between the sky and the sea, a curved trail like a thin line pulls the eye toward a lonely lighthouse, and that is why this place appears so often in images of wild Scotland. But that beauty is far from gentle because the path down is very steep. And while going down may feel easier, climbing back up becomes a heavy test of the heart, the legs, and the strength of any visitor. If fog suddenly rolls in and visibility drops below about 7 feet, walkers can easily lose direction among the empty rock and take a wrong step toward the cliff edge. The danger feels even stronger because most of the path clings to granite cliffs about 330 feet high, so one quick glance to the side opens a deep, empty drop below. Low. On top of that, the surface is often covered with moss, sea salt, and rainwater, making it as slippery as grease. So every step demands real focus. And in the middle of all that danger, strange hexagonal rock columns and the lighthouse from 19009 still create a beauty that feels both ancient and fierce, making this place very hard to forget. Cliffs of Moha Coastal Walk Island. Imagine standing at the far edge of a green land where giant walls of rock plunge straight into the Atlantic Ocean and make a person feel like a tiny mark before nature. Beyond that, danger, rock pillars broken away from the main cliff still stand alone in the violent waves like ancient watchtowers, while also sheltering tens of thousands of seabirds, making the whole scene feel both fierce and alive. Even more frightening, wet mud and sea fog can swallow the view in moments, making it very hard for walkers to tell where the trail is and where the cliff edge begins. Along this route of about 9 miles, beside cliffs rising about 700 feet, the stone tower from 1835 still holds its place above the coast like a quiet marker facing the open sea. Most of the walk is only a natural trail with no guardrail at all. And that fragile distance of just one step is what creates the heaviest pressure on the mind. When wind screams through the rocks, waves roar below, and strips of fog rush in without warning, this place becomes one of the harshest tests of courage in Ireland. Half-dome cables, United States. There are places where reaching the top is no longer simple walking, but gripping cables and pulling your whole body up a giant wall of rock with your own arms. But this place is even more frightening because lightning strikes here often. So if your hair suddenly stands up or the steel cables begin to make a strange humming sound, danger may already be right above you. When rain falls, the smooth granite becomes so slippery that many people get trapped on the wall, too afraid to keep going and too afraid to come back down. What makes this mountain even stranger is its shape, like half a dome cut flat, formed as outer layers of rock, slowly peeled away over millions of years, making it look both massive and cold like a giant stone sculpture. The final section, about 390 feet long, is the hardest part because you must move one small step at a time on the steep rock, while the drop of nearly 4,900 feet opens below you. Below you, even getting onto these cables is not simple because very few people are allowed in, and weekend permit odds can fall below 5%. So touching the cables can sometimes be harder than the climb itself. Haiku stairs, United States. Few places in the world combine an old military structure and a long-running public controversy the way this route of exactly 3,922 steps does. Even though it has been closed since 1987, its pull is still so strong that some people begin at 2 in the morning to try slipping past cameras and security points on the mountain. At its highest point of about 2,800 feet, some sections are so steep that people no longer feel like they are walking, but climbing a metal ladder rising almost straight into the sky. From far away, the steel stairs gripping the green mountainside look like a silver skeleton laid across a giant wall of plants, creating a strange beauty between metal and wild nature. The higher you go, the more the upper stairs disappear into cloud and mist, and once you pass through that white layer, it can feel as if you are standing in the sky with a sea of cloud below your feet. That is why this place can bring a fine of up to $1,000 or even jail time for trespassing, while still remaining a legend that feels half magical and half forbidden. Keelong Kishtwa Road, India. Some roads do not feel made for vehicles at all, but more like a test of how long a person can stay calm in front of rock walls and empty drops. The old buses and trucks here are often painted in bright colours as a way to ask for luck, because on this road, luck can matter almost as much as the steering wheel and the engine. And that is not the end of it, because water from the mountain crashes straight onto the tops of vehicles, turning the narrow dirt road into a strip of slippery mud that can blur the view ahead. This route runs for about 145 miles at a height of around 8,200 feet, clinging to the Himalaya slopes with bends so tight that every turn feels like a gamble with empty space. When two vehicles meet, one may have to reverse for hundreds of feet along the cliff edge to let the other pass, and in winter, snow can erase this road from the transport map for 6 months. Mahipar Highway, Afghanistan. Some roads look dangerous at first sight, and Mahipar is one of them, cutting across the Hindu Kush as a narrow strip filled with the feeling of death. The most haunting part is that deep below, the wrecks of hundreds of crashed buses and trucks still lie in the gorge like a silent graveyard, reminding people that even one small mistake can cost everything. And that is not all, because dark tunnels, dust, and truck smoke mix into a heavy haze that can reduce visibility to only a few feet, turning every curve into a gamble. The name Mahipar says a lot by itself, because people believe the cliffs here are so steep that even a fish would have to leap to get past them. Along this route of about 31 miles, one hairpin turn follows another, clinging to the cliff and stacking over itself like hanging steps, making the whole mountainside feel twisted around the wheels. Even with all that danger, this road still cannot be replaced, because food and goods must cross it every day to keep life moving between these harsh high mountains. Knife Edge Trail, United States, and imagine stepping onto a sharp ridge like a stone saw blade hanging in the sky, where every step makes your heart race because one look down reveals a deep, empty drop on both sides. When fog rises, that narrow strip of rock almost turns into a bridge floating above a white sea of cloud, making it feel as if you are walking alone on the back of a stone dragon crossing the sky. What makes it even more frightening is that there are no guardrails, no cables, and no built steps. So at times you must use both hands and feet to grip the rough rocks and move inch by inch. The whole trail is about 1 mile long and sits on a summit about 5,270 feet high, where cold grey rock stands against green forest far below. In the narrowest places, it is only about 2 feet wide, with drops of more than 1,969 feet on both sides, so walking here feels like balancing on the edge of open air. The wild nature of this place is protected so seriously that the area was once given back to preserve it untouched, and even dogs or other pets are banned because the ground is too dangerous. Sangla Valley Road, India. The most frightening part of this road is the huge rock roof at about 8,860 feet that blocks the sky and squeezes the vehicle between the cliff and empty space. When winter brings the temperatures down to about -4 degrees Fahrenheit, water from the rock freezes on the road and turns the narrow path into a surface so slick that even brakes are hard to control. Because of the long, steep slope, many trucks must stop often to cool their brakes, or the system can overheat and fail in the middle of the mountain. The road is only about 10 feet wide and twists tightly along the cliff, so every bend becomes a blind turn that drivers cannot predict. Right beside the tyres is a drop of about 1,969 feet with no guardrail, so even a small mistake can lead to free fall. Because of this danger, many map apps warn against driving here at night, yet it remains a vital route that drivers must face every day. NH22 Highway, India. Once part of an ancient Silk Road branch crossing the Himalayas, this place had already earned a deadly name long before any modern road surface appeared. The road also climbs to about 13,000 feet, where thin air not only cuts engine power by about 30%, but also wears down the driver's alertness. On top of that, in the shark jaw sections, the rock roof can hang only about 4 inches above the vehicle, forcing the driver to guide the wheel with extreme care to avoid hitting the stone. Even though it is called a highway, many mountain cut sections are only about 8 to 10 feet wide. So when two vehicles meet, one of them may have to reverse along the cliff edge with only inches of room. The fear becomes heavier because from the tyre edge to the river below is a straight drop of about 2,600 feet, with nothing there to stop a fall. In winter, temperatures can fall to about -22 degrees Fahrenheit and crack the road surface, while experienced drivers keep their windows slightly open to hear small stones hitting the roof, because that sound can mean a rock slide is getting close. Rohtang Pass, India. The name Pile of Corpses is not meant to scare people, but comes from the many travellers who were swallowed by snowstorms and disappeared in this frozen pass. In winter, snow can build up to about 49 feet deep and bury the entire road, forcing crews to work for about 3 to 4 months just to find the road again. What makes it even more frightening is how fast the weather can change, because one sudden snowstorm can erase all signs of the road within minutes. The pass stretches for more than 31 miles at nearly 13,000 feet, serving as an important link between mountain valleys while remaining one of the harshest places to cross. As you go deeper, giant walls of snow as high as about 49 feet rise on both sides, making the path feel like a white maze with no clear way out. At the foot of the pass, small medical oxygen cans are sold as commonly as drinks, because many visitors struggle to breathe in the thin air and can quickly fall into danger. Karakoram Highway, Pakistan. Called the eighth wonder of the modern world, this road is not only a highway but a strip of pavement hanging in the sky on top of a giant mountain world. A massive landslide once created a lake about 328 feet deep that swallowed many miles of the route, forcing people to cut tunnels through the mountain to win the road back. Right beside the road is a drop of about 3,280 feet with no guardrail, while the river below keeps roaring. So even one small mistake can end everything. During 20 years of construction, people passed down stories that almost every mile completed cost a human life. So its greatness always carries a chilling price. The deeper you go, the more overwhelming it becomes as the road passes through the meeting point of three great mountain ranges with peaks higher than 26,000 feet, making people feel very small among rock, ice and sky. Even with danger always close, this road still remains a vital lifeline through the high mountains, and brightly painted trucks keep crawling along the cliff edge day and night as if challenging death itself. Liathat Ridge, Scotland. This is not the kind of mountain people choose for a relaxing walk, but a narrow ridge hanging in the sky where one look down is enough to feel death opening on both sides. It becomes even worse on days of strong wind or fog, because on a strip of rock only about 3 feet wide, one sudden gust can throw a climber off the edge. Right below the boots is a near vertical drop of about 1,969 feet. So the emptiness underfoot can make the mind spin and the body freeze. From the valley below, the whole mountain looks almost completely sealed, with no gentle way up, so from the very beginning it appears like a rock wall shut tight against people. The fiercest part is a chain of jagged rock towers, with some sections only about 2 to 3 feet wide, forcing climbers to use both hands and feet to grip sharp stone and move little by little. Once you step onto that ridge, there is almost no way around and no easy escape. So the only choice is to keep moving forward or turn back and face the whole deadly route again. Mount LeConte Alum Cave Trail, United States. At less than 5 miles long, this trail forces climbers to gain about 2,799 feet. So from the very beginning, it drains strength fast, like a hard test of endurance. In cold weather, water seeping from the cliff can freeze into a thin, clear layer of ice so slick that one wrong step can turn the narrow trail into a very dangerous place. From the higher sections, the fear grows sharply because below is a deep space filled with fog, and the only thing helping climbers hold on is a set of cold steel cables fixed into the rock. On the way up, you pass a giant rock overhang about 79 feet high, like nature has built a huge stone roof in the middle of the mountainside. The higher you go, the more the scenery changes from broadleaf forest to pine forest, and then the trail presses so tightly against the slope that only one person can pass at a time. But even near the summit, the journey still does not become easier because the lodge above has no road for vehicles, so every supply must still go up by human strength or by llama trains. North Youngers Road, Bolivia. This is not just a mountain road, but a place where people once measured the line between life and death in only a few inches of tyre space beside the cliff. As you go lower, waterfalls pour straight from the rock walls onto the road, mixing with mud and thick fog until drivers feel as if they are moving into a white space with no bottom. And that is not all, because in many parts the space feels crushed between green-covered rock on one side and a dark drop on the other, as if the mountain is closing around the vehicle. Before a safer replacement route was built, this road took about 200 to 300 lives each year, because it was only about 10 feet wide, while the cliff beside it could fall as much as 1,969 feet. The strangest part was that drivers had to stay on the left side to see the cliff edge better, because even one small mistake while passing another vehicle could turn the whole truck or bus into twisted metal below. Between roadside crosses and wrecked vehicles left deep below, this road became one of the darkest and most unforgettable symbols of Bolivia. Dung, La Paz, India. At about 17,582 feet high, this place no longer feels like a normal mountain pass, but a fragile line between rock, snow, and air so thin it becomes hard to breathe. Along the road, long lines of prayer flags snap hard in the freezing wind, creating a scene that feels both beautiful and tense, as if the whole pass is trembling in the white emptiness. The air is so thin that sunlight becomes much harsher than usual, so even standing too long under the open sky can quickly harm both skin and eyes. This road was not made for sightseeing, but for strategic supply, which is why there is even a military medical tent at the summit to give emergency oxygen to people who collapse as soon as they step out of the vehicle. Nearly 9 miles near the top cannot hold a stable road surface because frozen ground keeps melting and freezing again, breaking the route into loose stone and icy mud. Between red warning signs, emergency oxygen, and ravines dotted with rusting vehicle wrecks that could never be recovered, people understand that simply staying on their feet here is already a small battle against altitude. Tuktoyaktuk Winter Road, Canada. This was not a road built on land, but a temporary strip of ice floating on Arctic water, existing only through winter before disappearing when warmer weather returned. Under the wheels, the ice kept cracking and making deep sounds like a thunder, reminding every driver that only a thin frozen layer stood between them and the black, freezing water below. In that white world, with no trees, no mountains, and almost nothing for the eye to follow, drivers could easily lose direction, especially when snowstorms turned sky and ground into one endless colour. Colour. Because it did not rest on rock or soil, the surface had to be at least about 3 feet thick to carry trucks weighing up to about 44 tonnes, so engineers also pumped freezing water upward to repair weak sections of ice. The most frightening part was that if a vehicle moved faster than about 22 miles per hour, its weight could create an underwater wave strong enough to break the very ice holding it up, turning the whole road into a deadly trap in seconds. Yet, on that fragile frozen strip, the night sky often lit up with northern lights, before climate change and shorter winters caused this legend to disappear forever. Grimsel Pass, Switzerland. From above, this pass appears like a dark ribbon clinging tightly to the mountain wall, with sharp turns stacked in layers that make the whole scene feel almost unreal. Long before modern roads existed, this was a harsh mountain crossing where people used horses and mules to trade goods, and many never survived the freezing journey. In that cold landscape, deep blue and bright turquoise lakes formed by melting ice stand out clearly, creating a strong contrast with the dark rock around them. As you climb higher, human presence becomes stronger, with massive dams blocking valleys and holding hanging lakes more than 6,562 feet above sea level. Bare grey rock surrounds the road, helping turn it into one of the most iconic driving and cycling routes in the world. Hidden inside those mountain walls are more than 99 miles of tunnels and giant hydroelectric plants, showing how deeply humans have cut into the heart of the mountain. Abana Pass, Georgia. Hidden under bright green grass is a mountain pass so fierce that it almost erases every feeling of a normal road, leaving only rock, mud and deep drops. Along the cliff edge stand silent clusters of stone crosses, a chilling reminder that this place has already taken many lives after one deadly slip. The danger grows worse when meltwater rushes down from the mountain, cuts across the road, and turns the soft broken stone into a slippery trap right above the abyss. The pass stands about 9,350 feet high and stays buried for 7 months each year under snow about 16 to 23 feet deep, leaving the whole area nearly cut off from the rest of the world. When the snow melts, the route appears as a narrow strip with no pavement and no guardrail, and in some places it is almost only wide enough for one truck tyre to edge past the cliff. Yet in the middle of all that death, hot springs still rise smoking from cracks in the rock, creating a rare, strange beauty and giving the pass its name, which means bath. Katara Pass, Greece. Carrying the name Curse, this mountain pass has long been linked to the story of an ancient army that collapsed in the freezing cold, making the name itself feel chilling. In the end, people had to surrender to that danger by drilling a tunnel through the mountain at a cost of billions of euros to replace the old road. Before it was left behind, the pass forced countless drivers to gamble with their lives on sharp hairpin turns clinging to the edge of deep drops. The road stood about 5,594 feet high, and in cold weather, temperatures could fall to about -4 degrees Fahrenheit, turning the whole route into a brutal machine of ice in a land better known for sunshine. The fear grew even stronger because the pass was locked between huge black pine forests where fog could roll down in seconds and erase all visibility. Today, the rusting barriers left behind stand silently in the forest like grave markers, giving the whole pass the cold feeling of a forgotten world. Passage de Goya, France. Not clinging to a mountain or crossing a river, this road lies exposed right on the seabed, like a thin strip of land that appears only when the water chooses to pull away. When the tide returns, trapped people sometimes have no choice but to climb the steel rescue towers and watch their cars slowly disappear beneath the sea. The danger grows worse because the road is always covered with seaweed and oyster shells, making it so slippery that tyres can lose grip, slide off the route, and sink into the deep mud on both sides. Twice each day, the sea rises about 4 to 13 feet and covers the whole crossing, leaving drivers only a short window before the water closes over it again. And even with huge countdown signs, dozens of vehicles are still flooded every year because many people keep trying to race the tide instead of turning back. That constant change between land and sea is what turned this place into one of the strangest and most haunting roads in France, where the ocean can erase the ground right in front of you. Zojila Pass, India. This is not just a high mountain pass, but a thin lifeline between two large regions where heavy snow can lock a whole area away from the outside world for many months. It feels even more disturbing when clouds sink lower than the road itself, making drivers feel as if they are moving across a strip of land floating in endless white air. In early summer, when the pass opens again, vehicles must crawl between snow walls about 49 to 66 feet high, looking tiny inside a frozen white maze. The road rises above about 11,480 feet and entered history when heavy tanks were driven across it during the conflict of 1948, something once thought almost impossible. Most of the route clings to cliff edges above drops of hundreds of feet with no guardrail, while mud, ice, and water from the rock walls keep turning the road into a slippery trap. Even with its grand and violent beauty, this place remains a true survival test, and many local drivers still pray before entering this dangerous mountain world.